This Tales of the Tempest retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons Omar Ismail and Cameron Strauss. For as little as $3 Australian a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content. I am genuinely surprised that nobody outside of this one random German YouTuber has done a review of this game. Even Destiny 2 and Rebirth have a handful of English reviews, but as for this game, nothing. So I guess I'll be the first English speaker to review this now mainline Tales game as I look back on 2006's Tales of the Tempest for the Nintendo DS. Around the time of Tales of the Abyss's release, big changes were happening at Namco. Despite the Tales series' moderate successes, Namco had been facing financial difficulties following the 1998 Japanese recession, which had taken a huge toll on the company's arcade division. By the early 2000s, the company was posting massive losses, leading to CEO and founder Masaya Nakamura to step down and retire. With Nakamura gone, Namco had looked to merge with another company to strengthen their position in the Japanese electronic entertainment market. After dealings with Square and Sega failed, Namco had turned to Bandai in 2005 to propose a merger. The deal would be finalised in late September and would see the two companies merge to form a new company, Bandai Namco. It would be in this large corporate restructuring that the ninth Tales game would be developed. In 2004, the Nintendo DS would be revealed and released to the masses, and soon began taking the world by storm due to its unique dual screens and touch-based controls. These unique features soon caught the interest of Bandai Namco, who were interested in a new Tales game for the system. At this point in time, the Tales series had seen multiple releases on handheld consoles, initially starting with the Game Boy Color spin-off game Tales of Phantasia Narakiri Dungeon, along with its two sequels on the Game Boy Advance. Along with the Narakiri Dungeon games, Bandai Namco had also experimented with releasing mainline Tales games on handheld consoles, initially starting with the god-awful Tales of Phantasia port on the GBA, which ironically would be a lot of European Tales fans' second Tales game after Symphonia. Bandai Namco would then follow this up with the pretty decent PSP port of Tales of Eternia, which would spawn a series of successful mainline Tales game ports on the system. However, unlike all previous handheld Tales games, this new upcoming DS Tales game would be an original brand new entry for the series, rather than just a port or a spin-off game. With both Tales teams busy working on the next home console Tales games, Bandai Namco would again turn to a new team to develop this game. Rather than develop an in-house team like with Project Melphis, Bandai Namco would instead turn to the small development studio DIMPS to create their new Tales game. Founded in 2000 by former SNK and Capcom employees, DIMPS had made a name for themselves in the GBA with the Sonic Advance trilogy of games, as well as a handful of other licensed games from series such as Digimon and Dragon Ball. Thus Bandai Namco felt the team was capable of developing a Tales game for the new DS console. Unlike the previous mentioned home console port, the new DS game would be designed as a more compact version of a Tales game that players could enjoy on the go. Despite the smaller scale of the game, DIMPS would struggle throughout development. These development issues were driven in part due to DIMPS attempting to make this Tales game in 3D on a system they had limited experience with. As a result of these challenges, DIMPS would attempt to cut back on features such as voice acting and skits in order to meet the game's 2006 deadline. Despite the cutbacks, DIMPS continued to struggle with developing this game. As a result, to help DIMPS finish the game, Tales of the Abyss's producer, Makoto Yoshizumi, would join the team following Abyss's completion in late 2005. Yoshizumi wouldn't be the only Tales veteran to help out, as Mutsumi and Amata would also join the team to design the characters, along with Daigo Okamura, who would design a couple of the villains for the game. Tales of the Tempest would initially be chosen as the game's name to reflect the chaotic nature of the game's development, story, along with the characteristic genre of RPG that awakens the soul. Tales of the Tempest would initially be teased in October 2005 under the name Tales DS, followed by a full announcement in December that year. Despite Yoshizumi's best efforts, DIMPS was unable to meet the game's original 13th of April release date, instead releasing the game on the 8th of June later that year. Unlike Tales of Legendia, which received the majority of its poor reviews from American reviewers, Tales of the Tempest would come out to mixed reviews from nearly all major Japanese game journals. As a result, Bandai Namco reclassified Tempest as an escort title to avoid tarnishing the name of the Tales series. They would also choose not to localise this game to the West. Despite the game's controversial nature, a fan translation would be attempted by the Tales fan group Absolute Zero, who had come to prominence following the translation of the PSX port of Phantasia. The translation would begin in mid-2010 and would be completed 3 years later in April 2013. With the game now in English, let's take a look into one of the most controversial Tales games ever made. The story starts in the capital of Jana, where 3 figures are attempting to conduct a ritual. We then get a recount of past events detailing a race of beast people called the Lemon, who used to dominate the land before they were wiped out by humans, who now hunt down the all remaining Lemons. Here we jump to the small village of Feln, where we meet our protagonist, Caius Qualls, who lives a peaceful life with his father, Ramrus, along with his friend Ruby and Natwick, who is also the daughter of the town's priest. Caius' life takes a dramatic turn when an injured knight arrives at the village carrying a pendant. The knight secretly gives Caius the pendant before dying, leading to Caius comparing the pendant with one he received from his mother long ago. Caius isn't given much time to think as the village falls under attack by strange black monsters. Despite his best efforts, Caius isn't able to fight off all the monsters, leading to Ramrus having no other choice but to use his beast form to defeat the monsters. Revealing himself as a Lemon, the villagers suddenly turn against him and begin accusing him of being the reason the village fell under attack. Retreating to his home, Ramrus reveals that he is not in fact Caius' father, and explains that Caius is also part Lemon. This revelation is cut short when 2 inquisitors of the church named Lucius and Romy arrive to arrest Ramrus. Caius escapes with Rubia to a nearby farmhouse, but later returns to Feln to see what had happened. Arriving back at town, Caius is shocked to find Ramrus captured. Rubia's parents attempt to plead on behalf of Ramrus to let him go, but are instead labelled as co-conspirators by Romy, who kills both of them. Returning to the farmhouse, Caius reveals the horrific news to Rubia, who rushes off to Feln to confirm the truth for herself. Caius travels after her, eventually finding her at the nearby port of Nullis, trying to board a boat to chase after the 2 inquisitors who killed her parents. Being unable to board a boat due to their age, the 2 head towards the capital of Jana on foot, with plans to rescue Ramrus and seek revenge. As for the full story, while you can always find cutscene compilations online, the game is like only 10 hours long, so you may as well play it at that point. Despite the Nintendo DS being comparable to a PlayStation 1, Tales of the Tempest decides to keep the 3D visual style used in its fellow 6th generation Tales games like Symphonia and Abyss. This includes the use of cinematic angles and cutscenes, showing off our characters in all their 5 polygonal glory. Playing this game, I am definitely appreciating the fact that the Namco Tales studios kept Tales of Destiny and Eternia as 2D Tales games on the PlayStation, because man does this game look rough. Speaking about the PlayStation 1 Tales games, do you remember the fun of having to open the menu every time you wanted to save, rather than just press A on a save point? Well, good news! Tempest brings that back, and with arguably the clunkiest menu UI in the series. The most basic tasks, like changing your gear or battle party, are made excruciatingly difficult thanks to how unfriendly this menu system is to the player. With towns and overworld in full 3D, navigation can be a bit of a challenge due to the Nintendo DS only having a D-pad. However, the game does allow for navigation using the touchscreen. This touch-based navigation also works in the overworld, which is now segmented to account for the DS's limited power. Despite being segmented, the overworld remains huge and extremely empty, and is also somewhat difficult to navigate, not only due to the controls, but also due to the lack of being able to turn the camera while moving. We also have to deal with the return of high-frequency random encounters, frequently stalling your trip. And for those saying just use holy bottles, not only are they more expensive than pineapple gels, they're also seemingly useless at keeping the encounter rate down. The world of Tales of the Tempest does have one nice touch that I'll give credit to, and that is the day-night cycle. While on the overworld, time will pass from day to night, resulting in different monsters spawning and different places being accessible. The player can immediately change the time of day by camping, which heals the party's HP, as well as give the characters a little skit-like exchange. Along with camping, cooking returns, but my god does it suck! For starters, unlike previous games, the food ingredient list is unnecessarily complex. Like, who the hell needs white spice to make a bloody sandwich? Worse, once you have gotten all the ingredients, you'll then be required to perform a quick-time touchscreen minigame that has easily failed, resulting in no food being made. Getting away from the mess that is this game's cooking system and going over to the characters, Tales of the Tempest brings us the smallest cast since Tales of Fantasia, with only 5 playable characters. Joining Caius and Ruby on their quest for revenge is Prince Tilkas Barone and his bodyguard Forrest Ledonyen, who hail from the island kingdom of Senshivia and are on their way to Jana to inquire about strange monsters that have recently appeared in their homeland. Later, the 4 are also joined by Arya Erkberg, a priestess who joins the group in order to put an end to the killing of the layman. In general, the cast of Tales of the Tempest is alright, although the lack of voice acting does limit the amount of depth one can get out of these characters, but a solid story does somewhat make up for it. To describe Tales of the Tempest as a cut-down / bare-bones Tales game would be a pretty accurate description if you ask me, and I also think such an analysis carries over to the battle system as well. Tales of the Tempest decides to revive the 3-line linear motion battle system with the new 3-on-3 linear motion battle system, or 3-on-3 LMBS. Just like in Tales of Rebirth, combat is conducted across 3 2D battle lines that the party members and enemies can easily jump between on the fly. However, unlike Rebirth, characters can now attack across lines. Also, unlike Rebirth, and for the first time in the series, your battle party is now limited to 3 characters, although the enemy can field more, so I guess the 3-on-3 part of the name is a lie. With the characters now able to attack across lines, the D-pad is now dedicated to the direction of the player's attacks. As a result, the characters can now only perform one type of regular attack combo, with them no longer being able to perform up, down and across attacks. Regular attacks do have one unique attribute as, by holding A during an attack, the character will charge up and launch a massive blow, which can break a guarding enemy and push them back. Despite the lack of directional regular attacks, arts are still performed via directional inputs, although you better make sure you have the right arts equipped before you head into battle, because Tales of the Tempest has no option to rearrange arts once you're in a battle, despite such a feature being found in literally every other mainline Tales game. Speaking about battle preparation, with the return of 3-line combat we also see the return of formations that change your character's initial stats. While you can boost your character's attack, defense and accuracy, I almost exclusively stuck to the formation that gives your character constant TP regeneration. This is because you lack the ability to regen TP through attacks like in Symphony of Abyss, as the game only gives you a tiny regen at the end of battle. This tiny regen is contrasted with some extremely TP hungry arts that will burn through your entire gauge. This is especially true for your Master Arts, performed by combining 2 specific base arts together, and Arcane Arts, conducted by performing a 3rd art after the Master Art. As a result, I frequently ran out of TP after only 2 or 3 fights, and was left to fight with only my regular attacks. What makes TP regeneration even more asinine is the fact that despite regenerating your health, camping will not regenerate any TP, leaving Inns as your only option to restore TP, outside of obsessive orange and pineapple gel use. Going over to the characters, despite wielding different weapons, the playstyle between the 3 physical fighters of Caesus, Tilkas and Forest doesn't really change much, as they all have similar speed and attack patterns. While they do have slightly different arts, the quick burnout of TP means that you hardly get a chance to use them. If burning out TP by arts isn't fast enough, you can burn even more TP with Caesus and Forest's ability to transform into Beast when at less than 50% HP. In Beast form, these two will have increased strength, but will lack the ability to use arts. They will also turn back into human form once their TP gauge drops to 0, which happens in about 3 seconds. If the physical fighters weren't similar enough, then the casters of Rubia and Arya are practically clones of one another, with both taking on the role of healer and offensive caster, sharing both spells and gear, resulting in deciding which one to put in your party as a matter of personal character preference. As you can imagine, with the game being on the DS, multiplayer in the main story is not an option. However, Tales of the Tempest does offer a side mode in which you and 2 other players with a copy of the game can explore a multi-floor dungeon and gain items to use in the main story. If a player gets into a fight, the other players can join in and help them out like in classic console Tales games. This multiplayer mode is kind of neat, although I feel like the soundtrack could use a bit of work on after hearing this lovely tune for the 10th time. But Toei Sakuruba returns, by himself this time, to compose the music to this game. Tales of the Tempest would be Sakuruba's first DS game, and he, much like Dimps, would struggle to compose tracks for the system's limited specs. As a result, Sakuruba would use a lot of pop tracks with very clear and upbeat melodies as seen in the main battle theme Encounter, and its variant's difficult situation and confrontation. Despite all the flaws with the game, I found the game's soundtrack pretty solid, and personally think it's better than some of the other mainline games, even with its downgraded music quality. Music isn't the only thing Tales of the Tempest downgrades, as voice acting has also been rolled back to only be used in battle and cooking, with most of the game's character dialogue being relegated to different pitch bleeps. Despite the major reduction in voice acting, Tales of the Tempest, like all other previous Tales games, still features an intro cutscene that is... oh. In all seriousness, I actually like Tales of the Tempest's opening cinematic, polygonal characters and all, and this is in part due to the kick-ass opening song Verses, performed by Misono Koda from Day After Tomorrow, returning from Tales of Symphonia this time as a solo performer. This makes Misono the first singer to perform 2 Tales opening songs, 3 if you include her performance in Soushitai Boku ni Dekiru Koto for the opening of the PS2 release of Symphonia. I'm not gonna lie, this game kinda sucks, and I can see why Bandai Namco delisted this game from the main series titles. Even comparing this game to, say, the PS1 Tales games, it's clear to see that this game is a massive step down, and don't even bother trying to compare this game with the previous PS2 Tales games. Tales of the Tempest lacks basic qualities found in nearly all other Tales games, like being able to adjust arts in battle, and having characters with unique playstyles. The game is also quite boring in multiple places, despite its short length, due to unnecessarily long overworld traversals and a very shallow plot in multiple parts. Despite all of its flaws though, I actually like Tales of the Tempest as a game. Much like with Tales of Legendia, the battle system is on the weak side, but it's still a Tales battle system that tests the player to position themselves in the right spot and attack the enemy at the right time. Its story might be short, but it's still a decent plot, and the game's soundtrack is also pretty good. I also found myself getting kind of attached to the characters, in part due to the small cast size giving each character a decent amount of time in the spotlight. Take Rubia for instance. At a glance, her random mood swings might seem like bad writing, but if you lost both your parents in an instant, you too would probably be conflicted in expressing yourself. So at the end of the day, I can't say if Rubia is one of the worst or best written characters in the series. And it's that view that I carry over to all the other cast members in this game. At the end of the day, Tales of the Tempest is a mixed bag of a Tales game, but I still liked it. With Tales of the Tempest being so poorly received, you'd think Bandai Namco wouldn't bother trying to make another DS Tales game. But remember, this is the same company who thinks that one Tales game a year is not good enough. Thus, only 1 year later, Bandai Namco would get another third party to make a DS Tales game, which is what we'll be talking about next time when we look back on 2007's Tales of Innocence for the Nintendo DS.